Did the painter Tom escape, or did he remain trapped forever? Did the villagers come together to help him? Let's find out.
The door was bolted shut, and Tom was left alone, his heart heavy with fear and sorrow. Meanwhile, Lord Blackwell took the magic paintbrush for himself. But no matter how hard he tried, the brush would not work for him. He painted gold coins, jewels, and riches, but the brush remained lifeless in his hand. The treasures he painted were dull and lifeless, turning to dust as soon as they touched the ground. Furious, Lord Blackwell threw the brush aside and stormed out of the room, leaving Tom locked away and forgotten. Days passed, and Tom began to lose hope of ever being freed. But one night, as Tom sat alone in the dark, he heard a soft, familiar voice calling his name. It was the old man who had given him the magic paintbrush. Though Tom could not see him, he felt the man's presence and heard his comforting words. "Do not despair, Tom," the old man said gently. "Remember, the true magic of the brush lies in the kindness and goodness of your heart. As long as you remain true to yourself, you will find a way to overcome this darkness." Tom felt a renewed sense of hope. He realized that the magic of the paintbrush could not be controlled by greed or force. It responded only to love and kindness. With this thought in mind, Tom began to form a plan. The next morning, when the servants brought Tom his meager meal, he asked them for a small cup of water. The servants were puzzled but agreed to his request, thinking it was a harmless wish from a boy who had been locked away for days. Once they handed him the cup of water, they left him alone in the dark room, locking the door behind them. Tom's heart raced as he carefully took out the magic paintbrush, which Lord Blackwell had carelessly thrown into the room the night before. With a cup of water by his side, Tom dipped the paintbrush into the water and began to paint on the cold stone wall of his prison. He painted a small window, imagining it opening up to the bright, sunny world outside. As soon as he finished the last stroke, the painted window began to shimmer, and with a soft creak, it sprang to life. The stone wall transformed, and before Tom's eyes, the window became real, allowing sunlight to flood into the room. Tom felt a breeze on his face and smelled the fresh air from outside. With hope rekindled in his heart, Tom quickly painted a sturdy ladder beneath the window. As soon as the ladder was complete, it solidified and leaned securely against the wall. Wasting no time, Tom climbed up the ladder and slipped out of the window, finding himself in the mansion's garden. The garden was quiet, with only the sound of birds chirping and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Tom knew he had to leave quickly before anyone discovered his escape. But before he could make his way out of the garden, he noticed a young girl sitting alone on the stone bench under a large oak tree. She was dressed in fine clothes, but there was a sadness in her eyes that made Tom pause. She was holding a small, withered flower in her hands, and she sighed deeply as she stared at it. Something about her loneliness touched Tom's heart. Curious and concerned, Tom approached her quietly. "Hello," he said gently. "Are you all right?" The girl looked up, startled, but when she saw Tom's kind face, her expression softened. "I'm fine," she replied softly, though her voice trembled. "I'm just lonely. My father is always busy with his work, and I have no one to play with." Tom realized that this must be Lord Blackwell's daughter. He had heard that the Lord had a child, but he had never imagined she would be so lonely. He felt a pang of sympathy for her. Without saying a word, Tom sat down beside the girl and took out his magic paintbrush. He dipped it into the cup of water he had brought with him and began to paint on a flat stone at their feet. The girl watched in amazement as he painted a beautiful, vibrant garden full of colorful flowers, butterflies, and birds. As soon as Tom finished, the stone garden came to life. The flowers bloomed in bright colors, the butterflies fluttered around them, and the birds began to sing sweetly. The girl's eyes lit up with wonder, and a smile spread across her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her sadness melting away. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Tom smiled back at her, happy to have brightened her day. "You're welcome," he said. "The magic paintbrush can bring anything to life, as long as it's used with kindness." The girl was fascinated by the magic paintbrush and the boy who wielded it. She had never seen anything like it before, and she felt a deep connection to Tom, who had shown her such kindness. "Can you paint something else?" she asked eagerly. "Maybe a friend for me to play with?" Tom nodded and began to paint a little puppy on the stone. The girl watched in awe as the painted puppy wiggled its tail, barked softly, and leaped off the stone into her lap. She laughed with joy as the puppy licked her face and wagged its tail excitedly. For a moment, all of her loneliness was forgotten as she played with the puppy. Tom was glad to see her so happy, but he knew he couldn't stay much longer. Lord Blackwell would soon discover that he had escaped, and he needed to find a way to leave the mansion before that happened. As Tom stood up to leave, the girl looked up at him with wide, pleading eyes. "Please don't go," she said. "I don't want to be alone again." Tom hesitated. He didn't want to leave her alone, but he knew he had to escape before it was too late. Then an idea came to him. "I'll paint something special for you," he said. "Something that will keep you company and bring you joy whenever you're feeling lonely." He dipped the paintbrush into the cup of water one last time and began to paint on a large, smooth stone near the oak tree. This time he painted a magical garden filled with all kinds of animals, flowers, and trees. He painted a small pond with sparkling water, a swing hanging from a tree branch, and a little cottage with smoke curling from its chimney. When he finished, the entire scene sprang to life. The garden was full of color and light, with animals frolicking and birds singing. The pond shimmered in the sunlight, and the swing gently swayed in the breeze. The little cottage looked warm and inviting, with a cozy fire burning inside. "This garden will always be here for you," Tom said to the girl. "Whenever you feel lonely, you can come here and find peace and happiness. The animals will keep you company, and the magic of the garden will never fade." The girl's eyes filled with tears of gratitude as she looked at the magical garden Tom had created for her. "Thank you," she said softly. "I will cherish this garden forever." Tom smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. He knew he had done something good, something that would bring happiness to someone who needed it. "Take care," he said as he turned to leave. "I hope you find joy in the garden and never feel lonely again." The girl waved goodbye, watching as Tom disappeared into the trees at the edge of the garden. She sat down on the swing, the puppy at her feet, and looked around at the beautiful world Tom had created for her. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly happy. Meanwhile, Tom made his way out of the mansion's grounds and headed back to the village. He knew he had to warn the villagers about Lord Blackwell's greed and protect the magic paintbrush from falling into the wrong hands. When Tom returned to the village, he was met with cheers and relief. The villagers had been worried about him, fearing that Lord Blackwell had done something terrible. Tom quickly told them everything that had happened: the rich man's greed, his imprisonment, and his escape. The villagers were outraged. They had long suspected that Lord Blackwell was a cruel and greedy man, but they had not realized the extent of his wickedness. They gathered together in the village square and decided that something had to be done to stop him. But Tom, ever the peacemaker, had a different idea. "We should not fight greed with anger," he said. "Instead, let us use the magic of the paintbrush to bring about change. We can create a world where kindness and generosity are valued more than wealth." The villagers agreed, and together they came up with a plan. Tom would use the magic paintbrush to create a grand painting that would teach Lord Blackwell a lesson he would never forget. The next day, the villagers gathered in the village square as Tom set to work on the largest painting he had ever created. He painted a scene of a beautiful, peaceful village where the people lived in harmony with one another and with nature. The village was filled with lush gardens, flowing rivers, and towering trees. The people in the painting were happy and content, sharing their resources and helping one another. But in the distance, Tom painted a dark, foreboding castle on a hill, surrounded by a barren, desolate landscape. The castle was cold and empty, with no signs of life or warmth. Inside the castle, Tom painted a figure of a man, alone and isolated, clutching a chest of gold coins with a look of despair on his face. As Tom painted, the villagers watched in awe as the scene came to life before their eyes. The painted village was so vibrant and real that they could almost hear the laughter of the children and the rustling of the leaves in the wind. But the castle on the hill remained dark and lifeless, a stark contrast to the world below. When the painting was finished, Tom placed it in the center of the village square, where everyone could see it. Then he invited Lord Blackwell to come down from his mansion and see the painting for himself. Curious and suspicious, Lord Blackwell reluctantly agreed and came down to the village with his servants. When he saw the painting, his eyes widened in shock. The lifelike images seemed to leap out at him, and he could not tear his gaze away from the lonely figure in the castle on the hill. As he stood there, transfixed by the painting, something began to change inside Lord Blackwell. He felt a deep sense of emptiness and sorrow as he realized that the figure in the castle was a reflection of himself, alone, isolated, and consumed by greed. The vibrant, joyful village below was everything he had never had, and he suddenly understood the true cost of his wealth. Lord Blackwell fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "What have I done?" he cried. "I have spent my life chasing riches and power, but it has only brought me loneliness and misery. I have lost sight of what truly matters: kindness, love, and the joy of living in harmony with others." As Lord Blackwell wept, the villagers gathered around him, their hearts softened by his genuine remorse. They had never seen him so vulnerable, so human. For the first time, they saw not a wealthy, powerful lord, but a man who had been blinded by his own greed and ambition. Tom stepped forward, holding the magic paintbrush in his hand. He knelt beside Lord Blackwell and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "It's not too late," Tom said gently. "You can still change. The magic of this brush can create a new beginning, not just for you, but for everyone. You can use your wealth and power for good, to help others and bring joy to the world." Lord Blackwell looked up at Tom, his eyes filled with gratitude and hope. "But how can I make amends for all the wrong I've done?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. Tom smiled kindly. "Start by sharing what you have with those in need," he suggested. "Use your riches to improve the lives of the villagers, to build schools and hospitals, to plant gardens and create opportunities for everyone. The magic of the paintbrush is not just in the pictures it creates, but in the good it inspires." Inspired by Tom's words, Lord Blackwell stood up, wiping away his tears. He looked around at the villagers who were watching him with a mix of curiosity and compassion. "I have been wrong," he admitted, his voice firm with newfound resolve. "I have let my greed and desire for power blind me to the suffering of others. But no more. From this day forward, I vow to use my wealth and influence to bring happiness and prosperity to this village and beyond." The villagers cheered, their spirits lifted by Lord Blackwell's heartfelt promise. They had been wary of him for so long, but now they saw a man determined to change, to make things right. They were ready to forgive and move forward together. True to his word, Lord Blackwell began using his wealth to transform the village. He built a large school where all the children could learn and grow, regardless of their background. He funded the construction of a new hospital where the sick could receive the care they needed. He commissioned the creation of beautiful public gardens where people could gather, relax, and enjoy nature. He also took steps to ensure that no one in the village went hungry or cold. He distributed food and clothing to those in need, and he provided funds to help rebuild homes that had fallen into disrepair. Over time, the village flourished, becoming a place of joy, community, and mutual support. As for Tom, he continued to use the magic paintbrush to create beauty and wonder wherever he went. But he no longer had to do it alone. With Lord Blackwell's support, Tom was able to teach others how to paint and create, spreading the magic far and wide. The villagers learned to express their own creativity, bringing even more color and life to their world. Tom and Lord Blackwell formed a close friendship, built on trust, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to doing good. Lord Blackwell often sought Tom's advice on how best to help the village, and Tom was always ready with new ideas and suggestions. The young girl, Lord Blackwell's daughter, also became close friends with Tom. She often invited him to the magical garden he had created for her, where they would play with the animals and talk for hours. The garden became a special place for both of them, a symbol of hope, friendship, and the power of kindness. Years passed, and the village grew into a thriving community where everyone worked together for the common good. The people were happy, healthy, and prosperous, and the lessons of the past were never forgotten. Lord Blackwell, once a symbol of greed and selfishness, became known as a wise and generous leader, loved and respected by all. As for the magic paintbrush, it continued to be a source of wonder and inspiration. Tom used it sparingly, knowing that the true magic lay not in the brush itself, but in the hearts of those who used it. He passed the paintbrush down to the next generation, teaching them the importance of kindness, generosity, and the power of imagination. And so the story of Tom and the magic paintbrush became a legend, passed down from generation to generation. It was a story of redemption, of how even the darkest heart can find its way back to the light, and of how the true magic in the world comes not from objects, but from the love and goodness within us all. In the end, it was not the magic of the paintbrush that transformed the village, but the magic of the people who lived there, their kindness, their compassion, and their willingness to help one another. And that, as Tom had always known, was the most powerful magic of all. And so the village by the sea lived happily ever after, a shining example of what can be achieved when people come together in the spirit of love and generosity. And Tom, the boy who had started it all, continued to paint, creating beauty and joy wherever he went, knowing that he had made a difference in the world. The story ends here.
If you're interested in hearing the beautiful story of a woman who struggled to find love and how she finally met her life partner, click the video here or follow the link in the description.